Alright, I wanted to start this off by saying this is my second time recording this, so this might not be as thorough as the Mew one because me and Carlos originally sat down together and recorded this, but my microphone was muted for almost the entire thing, and so I just couldn't post it. So these are going to be a lot more brief. I might not cover over everything that we originally said, and so if I miss anything, don't be mad. And remember, this is just my opinion, which means you might not agree with me. You might think your team is the best team in the league. I can only pick one best team for the league. You got to keep that in mind. They all can't be the best. So if you get upset by your placement, I'm sorry. That's all I can say for you. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, we have Trey's team, and I want to say that none of these teams are inherently bad. The problem with Trey's team is the fact that his fastest Pokemon is Hisuian Sneasel, who hits 115 base speed, which in the grand scheme of things isn't the slowest thing, but when your fastest Pokemon is a not fully evolved Pokemon, I think you have a couple issues. The first part of his draft, I think, was great. Urshifu and Aegislash have some very good synergy. They kind of cover each other's weaknesses a little bit, with Aegislash taking the fighting and fairy moves, and then Urshifu taking the dark moves that Aegislash doesn't want. Another issue that I do see with it is Urshifu gets Sucker Punch, and Aegislash gets Shadow Sneak. And those are both priority moves, which is fine if Tapu Lele didn't set up Psychic Terrain to stop that. Another thing we were talking about was Ursaluna Facade has 0 switch-ins. That's not a ghost type. Even Corviknight, if this thing was Terra Normal, it would KO everything. The Terra types for this team are Terra Water and Fire Water on Volcarona and Poison Dark on Sneasel. I just don't think, I get why Volcarona is the Terra, and Terra Water is very good for it. That's a great typing if you're gonna make that your Terra captain. But I think Ursaluna would have fit a lot better. And Sneasel, I mean, I get it, it's your remaining points. You can't really say anything too bad about it. Sneasel being your only grounded poison type kind of sucks to absorb toxic spikes, because this thing isn't always going to want to come. And I think the last thing was the hazards. Garganacl being the only stealth rocker and the only form of hazards across the entire team, I think is a little lackluster. I think there could have been a few more hazards on this team. But besides that, I think it's gonna be alright. If there was a Trick Room Pokemon, if there was Trick Room support, I think this team would also work really well, since it's a slower team. Ursaluna loves Trick Room. I bet Garganacl would love Trick Room as well. So yeah, this is our 8th place. We're gonna move on to 7th. Alright, in 7th place we have Cavalry's team. And the first thing I see with this team that I find kind of funny, and I'm not making fun of you by any means, I don't think this was intentional, I just find it funny. You have so many Stealth Rockers. I believe it is 6. Heatran, Great Tusk, Bisharp, Mega Swampert, Orthworm, and Cleaver not only gets Stealth Rocks, but also gets Stone Axe. Orthworm also gets Spikes, which is nice. It's actually the only Pokemon on this entire list that gets Spikes. And then Cleavor is your Defogger, and Great Tusk is your Rapid Spinner. Cleavor, I feel like, doesn't really want to always be running Defog, just because it sets up hazards, or at least Stealth Rocks, so reliably with Stone Axe. And Great Tusk, I think I mentioned this in the Mew draft. I've used this before, and maybe I don't like to blame Pokemon for being bad. I like to blame myself and me not knowing how to pilot it the best. But I didn't like Great Tusk. I felt like its 53 SPDF, base SPDF, really held it back a lot. And I was always trying to cover for that, which again, I'm going to blame myself. I shouldn't have focused on that. The Terras for this team are Heatran and Electrode. Heatran being, I believe, Steel Flying, and Electrode being Electric Ice. I don't think these are bad Terra types. Heatran really likes flying, so it's not weak to the Steel types. But Dragapult, I think, really, really likes Terra, especially Terra Ghost, because it doesn't get a physical ghost move that's not Phantom Force. So being able to run a Terra Blast Dragon Dance set, I think, is so valuable for this. And C Prime actually drafted Terra Ghost to be able to use it, and so that's, I think, one thing with this team. Another little issue is 3 steel types in Heatran, Bisharp, and Earthworm, and they all do different things, but there's just kind of a fighting weakness there. I wouldn't say ground, because a lot of things to deal with ground. And then the last thing I want to mention is Mega Swampert without Rain is a very interesting pick. Not what you typically expect, especially when both Pelipper and Politoed are both still on the board, especially after the grace period. So I thought maybe that would be something. Electro does get Rain Dance, though, so that can make up for it. But besides that, I think this team will work out pretty well. In 6th place, we have Starry's team. The biggest issue I have with this team is there is not a single steel type on this team, not even a Terra steel Pokemon. The Terra captains are Baxcalibur and Lilligant, Baxcalibur being Dragon and Ground, and Lilligant being Grass and Ghost. And I actually like the Terra on Lilligant because previously the only Ghost type was Shedinja, which Terra was banned on. Cannot make Shedinja a Terra captain. Going through the team, there is a huge gap in the speed tiers between Zeraora and Mega Diancie. It's a 33-point gap, which is huge. The main thing when it comes down to speed tiers is making Pokemon run more speed than they have to. Which, like, kind of comes down to natures, more or less. Not always, but if I have nothing in between Diancie and Zeraora, okay, I'm just going to use that as an example, those Pokemon cannot get away with running adamant natures. Like something in the middle, something around like maybe like 125-ish, because they're never going to outspeed Zeraora, and Diancie can never outspeed them either if they run enough speed, and so they can get away with running adamant or modest if it's a special attacker to be more powerful, and then it's more that they get to invest into their HP as well, making them just that much more bulky. And so hitting a bunch of different speed tiers is really what you're aiming for. And after that gap between Zeraora and Diancie, you're pretty good from there. I like this core of Moltres, Vaporeon, Gliscor. I think these do very well together to cover each other. Galarian Slowking, really cool pick. I like it. I don't want to say cool pick, but like a good Pokemon, very bulky, regenerator, and it got Chilly Reception this generation to fix its I think it was the only one that didn't get Teleport previously, the only slow Pokemon. So it definitely appreciates to have that now, and that also gives a defense boost to Baxcalibur. Mega Diancie, I really like this Pokemon a lot. I wish that it was maybe a tad faster, especially since, you can't run a Scarf on it. And I don't think a quad weakness to Steel is a huge deal, especially when you have Moltres, Vaporeon, and Gliscor sitting back here. And this Gliscor set, actually specifically, I was talking with C Prime about this. This is one of my favorite sets. This was back, I think, Gen 7. I used this a little bit, just on the ladder. We'll see how it turns out. In terms of hazards, 2 Stealth Rockers in Diancie and Gliscor, spikes on Diancie as well, and then Slowking gets Toxic Spikes, which is also a great absorber, and some great defoggers in Moltres and Gliscor. Really got to focus on keeping the hazards off the field, especially when you have things like Moltres, and if you bring Shedinja, I mean, as long as you don't get your boots knocked off on the Moltres, I mean, you should be fine. If you get hit at all with Shedinja, obviously you're dead, so that doesn't matter. And Zeraora gets a ton of coverage, which I like a lot. Very unpredictable in what moves it can use. And I really wish the Game Freak would have made this thing an electric fighting type. They did him so dirty. Like, how can you tell me Pawmot is a fighting type, but this thing's not? Don't make too much sense to me. But yeah, like I said, biggest thing holding it back is the steel typing and the speed tiers. You do have a little bit of Trick Room, but like options in Diancie and Slowking as well, but your team doesn't isn't slow enough. I feel for Trick Room, it doesn't have those hard hitters. So, yeah, let's move on. All right, I don't want to butcher the enunciation. Wow, I can't talk of your name, so I'm just gonna say Guy. Guy's team also has the same problem as the last team, where it doesn't have a steel type. The difference being that they do have Vesmiquen that is Terra Steel. I'm trying to find the other one. Terra Flying, Terra Steel. And this thing actually isn't too bad. It gets spikes, it gets toxic spikes, it gets defog, it gets roost, toxic. It can be a decent mon. The problem with it being your steel type is A, it takes up your Terra, which your other Terra captain is Shen Pao, which is Dark Electric. I'm assuming electric to hit the bulky water types that would otherwise kind of wall Shen Pao, especially maybe Dondozo was something that came to mind. Even though I don't think Dondozo was drafted. So yeah, and plus you're kind of locked into running heavy duty boots anyway, because you're quad weak to rocks, and so if you switch in before you Terra, that's 50%. That's a lot of damage. You don't want your steel type being that weak. I think Dragalge is a really good pickup. I like it a lot. It's a great toxic spike absorber and setter, as well as Venusaur being a great absorber. Gastrodon is only weakness is grass, and I feel like that gets covered so well on this team because you have Venusaur and Dragalge who both quad resist it. Maybe even Vesmiquen also quad resisted it before Terra, and then you have Zapdos and Rotom who also resist. So the weaknesses cover each other very well. Personally, I don't like the Screamtail pick, but I also just don't like Screamtail generally. But I know it's a pretty good fast support Pokemon. It sets up screens, Encore. Doesn't get. I thought it got Heal Bell, but it doesn't. Vesmiquen does get Aromatherapy though. And a little bit of a gap in the speed tiers between Shen Pao and Screamtail, but nothing too crazy. And then a little bit of a gap between Mesprit and Komala, but I don't think that's a big deal. The one issue with the team is you have a lot of hazard setters. You have Screamtail, Mesprit, Gastrodon, Annihilate, Vesmiquen, and Dragalge that all can set a different type of hazard. And your only rapid spinner is Komala, and I'm not saying Komala is a bad Pokemon, but it's pretty average. And then besides that, you have 3 defoggers, but I wouldn't want to be defogging all the hazards you're setting up. So, yeah, pretty good team though. Let's move on. Alright, and fourth we have a Gamer Person, and their team struggles from the same issue that Trey's did, but maybe even a little worse. The fastest Pokemon on this team is Chi-Yu at base 100, which base 100 isn't a slow Pokemon at all, but in a format like this, it's pretty slow, especially after all the other teams we went through have had Pokemon faster. The one saving grace to this, though, is that there is one Trick Room setter on the team in Weirdeer. It's not the best Trick Room setter in the world, but it gets Intimidate, so it can lower attack, or it gets Sap Sipper, so it can be just totally immune to Grass-type moves. Not that this team had an issue with Grass types, as it was. You got Clodsire, the king of hazards, gets Spike, Stealth Rocks, and Toxic Spikes all on its own, and absorbs Toxic Spikes, and then Knucklestack also does Stealth Rocks. The problem is there's not a single Rapid Spinner on this team. 3 great defoggers though, in two great ones in Mega Scizor, Tapu Fini, and then Dragonite also gets it, which I'm not saying it's bad, but Dragonite would just rather run other moves. The Fairy Dragon Steel Core in Goldango, Dragonite, Tapu Fini, and Mega Scizor is wild. It's going to be very hard to break through. The team would like a little wish support, I think, but that's not anything too crazy. The team is a little top heavy too. A lot of points invested early on, which I do the same thing, so I can't really, say too much about it. I'm trying to think what else me and C Prime were saying about this team, because I feel like this, a lot of these Pokemon just do pretty straightforward things. Chi-Yu is going to run Specs or Scarf. Darmanitan is going to run Band or Scarf because it's locked into a Choice Band anyway. I like this team a lot. It's definitely my my playstyle of team. Besides maybe Tapu Fini. I don't get Tapu Fini. If it got recovery, I know it would be like broken, but that's what would make me want to use it. Again, not saying it's a bad Pokemon, just not me. In third place, we have Bumble's team, and off the bat, there's a bit of a speed tier gap between Mega Sceptile and Tornadus, but I don't think that is anything that's too big of a deal. I know that we were mentioning like Mega Sceptile is kind of one of those megas that you don't necessarily like. It gets to a point where is it even worth drafting a Mega, and I think Sceptile's kind of over that line where I would rather pick up something that can run an item, just to have a little bit more variety. I think items really do a lot in draft, and when you can't change different items around, it hinders you, I feel, a little bit. My other issue with this team is the Terras. I don't understand the Terra on Ting Lu. Maybe a little bit. It's ground poison, I believe. Yeah, ground poison, and then rock fairy on the Avalugg. And maybe it's because this team needs a grounded poison type. Glimlet is the only grounded poison type, and that thing's not going to be staying alive that long, just by its nature. And then Ting Lu gets the Stealth Rocks, Stealth Rocks and Spikes. And maybe it's to absorb, like I said, maybe it's up to absorb Toxic Spikes, but I think Palafin likes Terra Water a lot more, and there's just other Pokemon that I think could have been a better Terra captain. I don't think defensive Terras are the way to go. But Iron Valiant, Palafin, Slowbro, Zoroark, Tornado, like, it's a threatening team. A lot of these mons are demons, along with, like, Ting Lu, Slowbro, and Tornadus being very bulky, especially with this Regenerator core here between Slowbro and Tornadus. That's going to be a little hard to break. The only Rapid Spinner being Avalugg, especially when the team is so hazard heavy, kind of sucks, because Avalugg is not a good Rapid Spinner, especially Hisuian Avalugg. You trade in an already like pretty crappy typing for an even worse typing. Rock does nothing for this. It makes the fighting and steel weakness a quad weakness, and gives it Strong Jaw, which it really doesn't need. I think it was doing fine beforehand. I'm excited to see Hisuian Goodra, pretty good Assault Vest user. I haven't used it at all, and Goodra's not my favorite Pokemon either, but I know the Steel Dragon typing is really cool, and I'm excited to see how Valiant goes, especially because I'm also using Valiant this season. There's 3 mons on this team that are the same on my team, Valiant, Slowbro, and Zoroark. And I know I was talking to C-Prime about Zoroark, and I told him, I was like, it really comes down to the coach. Like, I don't think Zoroark's broken. I just think if a coach knows how to use it effectively, it's a really good Pokemon. And so, depending on how Bumbles plays and, like, how this Pokemon does overall, we might be upping this Pokemon in points. I'm excited to see how this team plays. In second place, we have TBNX Fury. Now, this team is really, really good, and it definitely fits my playstyle a lot. Sneasler being one of the fastest Unburden users, I think it's only tied with normal Sceptile. I think they have the same base speed at 120. Plus Rillaboom, who sets up grassy terrain, is a really good combo, because Sneasler is so strong. And so is Rillaboom, especially since it has Grassy Glide, since this is National Dex. You have Corviknight, one of the best Steel types in the game, one of the best Defoggers in the game. The Fairy Dragon Steel Core in Corviknight, Sylveon, and Salamence, I think, is really, really good. And Slowbro and Sylveon, Mega Slowbro and Sylveon fit really well together, because Mega Slowbro can't be crit, and one of its biggest weaknesses is Toxic. And Sylveon's a Cleric, it gets Heal Bell to be able to handle that. Donphan as a spinner, but it's also the only Stealth Rocker on the team, which I do think holds it back a little bit. But when you have Salamence and Corviknight as the Defoggers, I feel like this team isn't gonna, like, doesn't want hazards on the field as much, just as it is. C-Prime was saying that he doesn't like the Delphox pick. He doesn't really think it's a good fire type. I can't wait for him to get proven wrong. Heliolisk, Glow Kicks, both very offensive Pokemon in their own right, just kind of rounding out. Only thing I would say with this team is it could maybe use a little more bulk. Like, I look at Corviknight and Sylveon, and I know they're bulky mons, but it's just not what I think when I think, like, these fat, like, walls, these tanks. But, hey, maybe he'll make it work. Dragonette Salamence is also, like, another win con. That was something that C-Prime was saying, is there's a lot of win cons on this team. A lot of things that can just put in work. I mean, low kicks with First Impression plus Tinted Lens. I've used this thing. If it has the matchup, it'll do so good. Donphan's just kind of like a diet Great Tusk. Great Tusk would have been a better pickup, but with this thing being cheaper, it works out. And then Sneasler also gets Toxic Spikes, and it absorbs them, so that's pretty good. I think it's a very good absorber. Terra Captains on this team are Salamence and Delphox. Salamence being Dragon Fairy, which I think is pretty good. Getting that Fairy typing would be pretty good for it. And then Delphox is Fire Grass, which I think the only grass move this thing gets is Grass Knot or Solar Beam, but no Energy Ball. And so being able to run Terra Blast Grass to hit the water and ground types, I think is going to be pretty good for Delphox. It's going to make it a little bit better, especially with Rillaboom's Grassy Surge support. In first, we have Froze's team. Overall, I think this team is very, very solid. A lot of different things. You have the speed tiers, which are amazing. They drop very well. You have Tapu Koko at 130. You have Sceptile at 120, who gets Unburden, which I was just mentioning, and it gets the Electric Seed from Tapu Koko. You have Iron Moth at 110, and then from there it just keeps going down with Iron Treads, Hydreigon, and it just hits almost every speed tier. It's amazing. I know I mentioned earlier on Galarian Slowking with Chilly Reception, but that could also work on this team with Alolan Sandslash, who gets Slush Rush, doubling its speed in the Hail. The one thing I will say, besides the Slowking and Tangrowth, which are both very bulky mons, very good Regenerator core, this team is very offensive, and that could come back to bite. We'll see, because this team is scary, especially when you get the electric terrain with Treads and Iron Moth. Iron Moth is insane under electric terrain. Very good Stealth Rockers in Iron Treads, and Hydreigon, I think, sits up Stealth Rocks really well. And then Alolan Sandslash also gets them along with Spikes. And then Iron Moth gets Toxic Spikes along with being able to absorb them. Terras are Urshifu, Water, and Grass. I assume Grass to take the Grass and Electric moves incoming. And then Sceptile is Grass and Flying, which when this thing gets Acrobatics, I think Flying is one of the best options for it. Still weak to Ice, but like this thing ain't living a hit anyway, whether it Terras or not. The Slowking Tangrowth, with this being very specially bulky and very physically bulky, both getting Regenerator, I feel like that can be a little bit rough to get through, but we'll see how teams do it. All these teams I think were really good. I'm excited to see where this season goes. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and let me know in the Discord how you would rank these teams, what I missed, and yeah. Hope you enjoyed. See you later. Goodbye.